Okay, good morning to everyone. We're learning Daf Yomi, page 75 in Tractate Shabbos, and we're holding in the 7th chapter. The name of the chapter is Klal Godel, major rule. So we'll start from Amar Rav Zutra Bar Tuvi Amar Rav, which is the second line from the top. Amar Rav Zutra Bar Tuvi Amar Rav, Ameiseh Chut Shel Tfira B'Shabbos, one who stretches the thread of a stitch on the Shabbos, Chav Chatos. And the one who learns one thing from a heretic. Oh, it says it is prohibited in number 4. It is prohibited to learn Torah, from a heretic. What? Even Torah law from a heretic, right. Lest one be influenced by to practice idolatry. But usually a heretic doesn't practice anything, no?
I don't know
I thought maybe a heretic is not necessarily atheist. Atheist is not. The point. So heretic is someone against the Torah. The point is, don't learn Torah from him. Now the question is, how do Rabbi Meir learn from Acher? I guess we can say that Acher was not really per se a heretic.
He was just off the derech.
Call him an apostle.
No, that's the same as a heretic.
The same as a heretic. So,
right. But he was just off the derech. That's different.
No, so I heard an interpretation that answers how can Rabbi Meir learn. We just learned you're not allowed to learn. It says Rabbi Meir was very unique. His neshama was very potent. Called it very special neshama, that he knew how to take the inside, right, and to throw out the pill. Right. And he took the good, and he was able to identify it. Most people can't do it. That's why this is how instruction for all is not to learn from the heretics. So then you ask the question, how come it says in the Mishnah, Ezu Chacham, who is the smart man? Haloimid mikol adam. One who learns from every person. Right. So how can you answer that? So maybe we can say that it says Adam. Someone is the level of Adam, but if he's in the level of non-Adam, he's a heretic, he's idolaters, and they behemoths nidmu, they're like animals, then they can't really consider it Adam. But that's my take on it. But
let's see where it goes.
It says Chayav Misa is liable to death. And if one knows how to calculate the astronomical progression of the seasons and the celestial positions of the constellations. So he knows how to understand astrology, he knows how to make these calculations of astrology, and he does not calculate them. Also, it is forbidden to relate Torah rulings from him. Doesn't say you're not allowed to learn from him, but it said don't relate Torah rulings from him.
All right, let's see where this goes, because I have a question on this, but I want to hear what they say. Go first. Because the Alter Rebbe did a whole calendar with the
But this is someone that knows and he doesn't. The Alter Rebbe did it.
And a Rambam.
Read it again. Read it again what we just said. If one knows how to calculate, and he doesn't. They knew and they did calculate. The issue is when you know and you don't.
Okay.
It's like playing stupid.
Okay.
You know how to do it. Why didn't you do it? Magoishto. So what is Magoishto? Concerning the definition of Magoishto, before we called Magoish heretic. So Rabbi Shmuel Chadomar Charshi is a sorcerer. Chadomar Gidufe is a blasphemer. He's a cursing type of a guy. Yeah. Blasphemy is cursing Hashem, right? God forbid. So that's a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. So it's not. So this really answers the question, because Acher, a question we said about Rabbi Meir, because Acher was not a sorcerer and he was not a blasphemer.
Right. He was just off the derech.
This time the Rav Omar Gidufe, it can be concluded that Rav is the one who said that Magoish or Magoishto is a blasphemer. The Omar Rav Zutra Bar Tuvi Amar Rav Aloi Medovar Echad Min HaMogoish Chayav Misa. One who learns something from Mogosh, even Davar Echad, even one thing, is liable to death. If you think it means sorcerer, Haksiv, what's the connection, Mr. Cohen, to the secret to happy marriage. I'm not following, but it says one is liable to death if you're learning from this sorcerer, or in the case of Rav, is a blasphemer. This, if according to Rav you would say that it means that Mogosh means sorcerer. It is written, why? It is written, you shall not learn to do act of sorcery. But it says but you may learn sorcery in order to understand and rule on such matters. Rabbis need to know how to rule in such matters. So hence, Rav could not state categorically that one who learns something from a sorcerer is liable to death. This time it can be concluded that it is Rav who said that Magoshta means a blasphemer, someone who, God forbid, curses Hashem. So the Gemara elaborates on the third statement of Rav Zutra. Amar Bishum Impozi, Amar Bishua Ben Levi, Mishum Bar Kapor, Kol Edel Chashav B'Kuf V'Azos V'Nei Choshev, Olav HaKos Umeir V'Spal Avai Lo Yebitu Ma'aseh Lo Ero. So someone who knows how to make the calculation of the constellations and the tkufas, different times of the year, and he chooses not to use his talent, not to use his knowledge, not to do anything about it, the verse scripture states about him, and the work of God they do not regard, and the action of his hands they do not see. So we just learned before that it's something negative. If you know how to do it and you don't do it, people who learn from you are not allowed to quote you and to say that they learned it from you. From where do we know that it's a mitzvah to, if you can, make the calculation of the times and the understanding of constellations, that you need to make those calculations? It's incumbent upon a person to calculate the progression of the seasons, the position of the constellation. Shenema ushmartem v'asisim ki chochmaschem v'naschem le'inei ha'amim. It is stated, you shall safeguard and perform them, for it is your wisdom and discernment in the eyes of the nation. What wisdom and discernment is in the eyes of the nation? You have to say this is the calculation of the progression of the seasons and the position of the constellations. 75.8.2 Hatzot Tzevi, hunting a deer, etc. Tanu Rabban, Hatzot Chilozim Apotze, if one traps Chilozim, so we said before that it's a sea creature that comes out every 70 years, right? After removing a Chilozim from the water, they would squeeze out its blood for the blue dye, the Tchelas, that was used in construction of the Mishkan. So, if one traps chilozim and squeezes it with his hands to force out its blood, is only obligated to one chatus for performing the melacha of trapping. But what about squeezing the blood? Is not punished. Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is liable to two. Because he says squeezing included in the category of threshing. And so one is liable for that labor as well, for trapping and for squeezing out its blood. So the rabbis disagreed with Rabbi Yehuda, and they said that squeezing is not included in the category of threshing. Threshing is used for getting the wine out of the grapes, or juice, grape juice, and getting oil out of olives. But that's his threshing, or threshing grain, but squeezing the blood out of the chilozin is not considered threshing according to the rabbis, and therefore he would be liable only to one chatas. What is the reason of the rabbis for ruling leniently in this matter? They hold that the malacha of threshing applies only to that which grows from the ground, not to fish. If it goes in the ground, then it's under the category of threshing. If it's not in the ground, it's not threshing. But that also be liable for taking out, for killing the chilazon, killing this sea creature. He is not liable for killing because the Bais is discussing a case where where he squeezed the chilazon after it was already dead. So therefore he didn't do the sin of killing him. You can even say that he squeezed the chilazon while it was still alive. Nevertheless, he's not liable for killing it because he is considered preoccupied with another act, the melacha of vis-a-vis the melacha of taking a life. So we need to understand what does it mean over here, the melacha of taking a life, and it's not considered killing it. It's not a melacha.
Maybe the ikar was that he wanted to get the blood.
So we'll see in 25 it says, literally its head is cut off and it should not die, ? Although Rabbi Shimon holds that one incurs no liability for forbidden labor performed unintentionally because he was only wanting to get the blood while one was engaged in a permitted activity, he concedes that liability does occur when the forbidden labor is an inevitable consequence of the permitted action, which is inevitable that you're killing him by squeezing out his blood. And if someone cuts off the head of a living creature on the Shabbos, he said, I don't want to kill him, I just wanted his head. He has violated the prohibition against taking a life on the Shabbos, even if he declares that he does not intend the creature to die. Since its death is inevitable, he is considered to have taken the creature's life intentionally, and he has transgressed even according to Rabbi Shimon. Here too, since the chilazon will certainly die when its blood is squeezed out, the person should be considered to have taken the creature's life intentionally.
So it should be 3. If we're going to go with that. All right, let's go.
No, there's something called melech machshavos. He says that is, as far as taking the chilazon's life is concerned, he is regarded as being preoccupied with another action. Hence, his killing is not a calculated labor, melech machshavos, for he did not intend for the chilazon to die. That's according to Rava. But Abai and Rava both agree that about the concept of inevitable act that you will be liable. The Gemara says, "Shani Ocho the Chamad is ben Shama," because the longer it stays alive, the more he is pleased. Why? Is that his die will be clear. So he has an intention to keep this sea creature, this chilazon, alive as long as possible, so the color would be better. Why is he not allowed to shecht on Shabbos? Rav said because of dying. Coloring. It says dying. When was the labor of slaughtering performed during the construction of the Mishkan? We said the whole 39 melachos is based on what was done in the Mishkan. Right. When was shechting done in the Mishkan? So the Gemara says that it was done, the skins of the rams could have been obtained by strangling the animal instead of slaughtering it. So the Gemara now assumes that since the Mishkan describes the malacha of taking a life as an act of slaughtering, one incurs liability only through that method of killing, by cutting through the esophagus and the windpipe and the trachea with a specially sharpened knife. The Gemara therefore questioned when the act of slaughtering was performed in the Mishkan. When the act of slaughtering was performed in the Mishkan? Well, it says, Rav Omar Mishum Tziveh, Shmuel Omar Mishum Netilas Neshama. Rav said because of dying, and Shmuel said because of taking a life. Mishum Tziveh Ein, for dying, he is indeed liable. Mishum Netilas Neshama, but for taking a life, he is not. Eimav Mishum Tziveh say that Rav means that the person is liable also for dying. it goes without saying that he is liable for taking a life. I shall say something about the opinion I stated, that later generations will not come and ridicule me by asking, what pleases the slaughterer about dyeing the animal's flesh? What pleases the slaughterer about dyeing the animal's flesh? And so I explain as follows. It is pleasing to him that the place of slaughter, the throat, be soaked with blood, so people will see it and come to buy it from him, because I guess it would look like it's fresh. It was just shechted.
Yeah, nice fresh steak, yummy.
And salting it and tanning it. The Gemara says, salting is the same as tanning. Tanning is usually working on the skin, on the hide, making it better. So salting is the same. I guess it's also beneficial for the hide.
Okay, I don't know.
Rabbi Yochanan remove one of them from the list of the 39 primary labels, and insert tracing lines in its place, right? Because if you look at the Sefer Torah's parchment, you'll see lines. Right. So we said sirtut is also malacha, making those lines. It's not a job. It's also a job.
When the thing
they work on the skin after. We're dealing now with the hide.
I think they were doing the lines to make the letters straight.
Right, tracing. So it says, what about tracing? Maybe you should add it to the 39 malachos. That's a question.
Okay.
Why not add it? Is it not malacha to do the lines?
Okay. Sounds good.
Amarav Aruna Ayman the Melach Bisra, someone sold meat, Chav Mishum Abed, is liable on account of tanning. Rav Omar Ein Ibud B'Ochin, there is no tanning in the case of foods. Amar Rav Ashi Vafilu Rav Avuna Lo Amar the Kaboil Leucha. Even Rabbi Bar Avuna said his ruling only where one needs meat for the way, which means in which case he must salt the meat heavily in order to preserve it. Oh, that's like aging meat. Yeah. Salting meat is tantamount to salting a hide. But if the meat is designed or designated for home consumption, not for the road, like beef jerky is a beef that can last for a long time.
Yeah,
beef for the road.
Is there any kosher beef jerky around?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a person, but if the meat is designated for home consumption, he may salt it. For a person does not render his food inedible like wood with heavy salting. So heavy salting is benefiting the hide as well, but this is usually done if you plan on traveling. Smoothing it and cutting it. One who rubs the ground between the pillars on a pavilion on the Shabbos, he is liable on account of smoothing. Rubs the ground, between the pillars, I guess cleans up the cracks. Rav Ashi told me 3 things in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. One who planes the tops of poles on the Shabbos in order to sharpen them. Sharpen the
for a spear.
Tops of poles.
I don't know.
You know what a plane is? Go back and forth. It's a carpenter tool. Chav Mishum Mechatech is liable on account of cutting. One who spreads a dressing on a wound on a Shabbos, Chav Mishum Machik is liable on account of smoothing. One who chisels a stones on the Shabbos to polish it, Chav Mishum Makir Patish is liable on account of striking the final blow. I guess doing the finishes. Makir Patish is doing the finish.
That's why you can't do a puzzle.
One who engraves an image on a utensil, or blows a glass utensil, chav mishumakir or patish, is liable on account of striking the final blow. The is someone who removes protrusions from a garment. Things are sticking out of the garment and he clears them out. Chav mishumakir patish is also liable on account of striking the final blow, doing the finishes. This ruling applies only when he's particular about them. If it's just something that he removed without paying too much attention to it, it's not the same liability. Is writing 2 letters and erasing in order to write 2 letters. So he wrote Aleph and Beis, for example. If a person wrote 1 large letter, or in the size of the letter that he wrote, you can write 2 letters. Potur is exempt from punishment. However, if he erased 1 large letter, and he can write 2 in the place of one of that large one, chayav is liable. So writing 1 big aleph, for example, you can write 2 letters inside this aleph, you're not liable. But erasing this big aleph, and now you can write 2 letters in there, you're liable. So there is a stringency of erasing over writing. Building 1, demolishing 2, extinguishing 3, kindling and striking the final blow 4 and 5. And any act that has in it the culmination of a labor, you're completing the job. You're liable on account of striking the final blow for doing the finishes, for finishing the job. These are the primary labors. What is elu? Why the word these? What does it serve? To exclude the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who obligates a person for a derivative labor even in the place of a primary labor. It says in 28, we learned above 73b that in the introductory statement, the Mishnah teaches the maximum amount of chatas offering is 39. A person would have to bring for 1 lapse of Shabbos awareness. In Tractate Shabbos 16a, Rabbi Eliezer states that if a person performs an av melocha and it's toldo, he is liable to separate chatos for each violation. Our Mishnah, by stressing here in its conclusion that these 39 labors are the obvious melachas, teaches that a person is not liable for toldo when he is already liable for its av. That's the concept of kimle, but the Rabbi Menashe, since he is liable for a much more severe violation, which is the violation of av, the primary melacha, he will be will let him off the hook on the toldo. But that seemingly it's not the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer would say that he is also liable for chatos for the toldo, for the derivative, for the secondary melacha. Secondary melacha usually is the melacha that leads you to that. Let's say you use the hammer, right? Using the hammer on Shabbos to finish a job. You said, but you figured out that the hammer is loose, so you started fixing the hammer itself. So that's like derivative for something that leads you to. But in general, obvious melachos is the 39. It's anything that is associated, is secondary to it. That would be the toldo, the derivatives. So to exclude, so these come to exclude the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Why does it say 40 melacha is 40 labors minus 1? To exclude the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda adds to the list of primary labors lining up the warp thread with a rod and bidding the weft threads. The weft threads. The sages said to him, Shevet arehu bechlal meisech, lining up the warp threads with a rod is included in the category of mounting the warp. So these are melachos that are associated with weaving, making clothes, dealing with wool, fabrics. Medakte karo b'chal oireg, and beating the weft threads is included in the category of weaving. New Mishnah. From here on, the Mishnah discusses the details of the Avos Melachos enumerated in the preceding. Our chapter is called Klal Godel. There's another klal, another rule. They stated yet another general rule. Kol hakosher latzniya. Whatever is fit to store. Umatzin kamo, the people store it in such a quantity. V'tzir b'Shabbos, and one carried it out on the Shabbos. Chav chatos olov, is liable to a chatos for it. Said in 37, he carried it from one domain to another. The same rule applies to transporting 4 amos in a public domain. V'tzir b'Shabbos, he carried it out. Chav chatos, is liable to sin offering. V'chol she'eino kosher latzniya. But whatever is not fit to store, ve'ein matzniin kamo, and ve'ein matzniin kamo, people do not store it in such a quantity. V'tzir b'Shabbos, and one carried it out on the Shabbos. Eno chav ela matzniyo, only the one who stores it is liable. The Gemara scrutinizes the first phrase of the Mishnah. Kol hakosher latzniya le'apukimai. What does it mean, whatever is fit to store? What does it mean to exclude? What is an example of something not fit to store? Everything is fit to store. You can store your car, you can store your keys, you can store your food, you can store everything. It means to exclude menstrual blood,
Right.
which has no use.
Right.
It means to exclude the wood of an Asherah tree.
Right.
Gemara analyzes the two opinions. Man the Omar Damnid, the one of Papa who said that menstrual blood is not fit to store. What are you going to do with Damnida?
I have no idea.
Menstrual blood.
And the one thing that says, well, if you're going to check for
42 says, although sometimes it's necessary to keep the blood so that the rabbinic authority can determine whether the woman is tame, Rav Papa refers to blood that was already examined.
right,
Hence,
so
there is no purpose in
why
storing
would
it
you
further.
keep it? I don't know.
It's a
disgusting.
chidush ha'aran.
It's disgusting. All right.
To exclude wood of Asherah tree. Obviously, why would you want to store it? You want to destroy it.
Right.
It's Asherah tree, which has to do with idolatry.
You can even use it for marshmallows.
If you said Madam Nido, if you said that menstrual blood is not fit to store, how much more so Atzi Asherah? Kol shekin Atzi Asherah. Wood of an Asherah tree is certainly unfit. However, the one Mar Ukva who said that the wood of Asherah tree is not fit to store could say, but menstrual blood,
For a cat, I don't know.
menstrual blood is sometimes stored for a cat to eat.
Ugh.
Therefore, one who carries it on the Shabbos is liable. The Gemara explains why Rav Papa maintains that menstrual blood is never stored. Ve'idach. And the other one, Rav Papa holds, Kevan the Chalosho. Since a person becomes weak if his blood is fed to a cat, it says a person can be affected from it if the cat is consuming its blood. Lo matzah, menstrual blood is not stored for that purpose. So there's no really purpose of storing the blood.
There's plenty of other stuff for a cat to eat.
The Gemara notes that the ruling of our Mishnah is not unanimous. This ruling of the Mishnah is not in accordance with Rabbi Shimon. If you would say that this ruling is in accordance with Rabbi Shimon or Omar, then he has stated a conflicting ruling in another Mishnah. For he said there, they did not state all these measurements except for those who actually store them. According to Rabbi Shimon, it says in 48, note 48, the minimum measures for liability stated in the Mishnah below, 76b, are applicable only for the average person who stores such an amount. A wealthy person, however, would not be liable for carrying out those minimum measures, because he would not be storing such small amounts. However, he states that Rabbi Shimon disputes our Mishnah's second ruling. According to the rabbis of our Mishnah, if a person actually stores and then carries out less than the stated minimum amount, he is nevertheless liable. According to Rabbi Shimon, even if a person stored an item, he is liable only for carrying out the stated minimum amount. According to Rashi, Rabbi Shimon's statement disputes two ruling of the Tanna Kama. He holds that only people of average means are liable for carrying out the minimum amounts stated in the Mishnah. A wealthy person, however, does not store such an amount, is not liable. And B, no one is liable for carrying out less than the stated minimum amounts, even someone who actually stored such a minuscule amount. The minimum stated in the Mishnah apply even to items that were stored. It's from the Ritva Mahak. So the Mishnah stated, "V'chol she'eno kosher la'atzniya," but whatever is not fit to store, only the one who stores it would be liable. But if another person carries it out, he is exempt from punishment. Amar Rabbi Lozo said, "Ha deloika Rabbi Shimon ben Lozo." This ruling of the Mishnah is not in accordance with Rabbi Shimon ben Lozo. Tanya Klalom Rabbi Shimon ben Lozo. Rabbi Shimon ben Lozo stated a general rule: Kol she'eno kosher la'atzniya, whatever is not fit to store, which we said before, blood and asherah, ve'en matzniyin kamo, or people do not store in such a quantity. Ve'uchshal hazev etzniyo, but if it was fit for this particular person and he stored it, and another person came and carried it out, this person who carried it out is liable on account of the intention of this other person who stored it. So we will stop here, right?
Yeah.
We'll continue, God willing, tomorrow. Why do you say Mishnah after the Mishnah?
Here, no, I thought I miscalculated.